it's very unfair to think of places as finite. The very essence of humanity is its fluidity.
Right.
We are ever changing, ever growing. So obviously we're going to change and grow. And you only know what you know in that moment. You can only make decisions based on what you know in that specific moment in time. But once you have better data, you can be like, oh, I could actually do this one, but you just didn't know, right?
So if we had a global business services company looking at those three markets, say in East Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya, pros and cons, you could help them actually also make that comparative case, right?
Exactly, yeah. We can make it in terms of comparative, in terms of how expensive labor is, right? So you have to also understand human capital is different.
The
from
other
country.
side, right? Not just the labor laws, but the labor itself already
exactly.
also, right?
Also how competent labor is as well.
Welcome to Melia Cred, Conversations with Elvis. I'm Elvis Melia, and at Melia Cred we provide consultancy and research for economic development. And in these conversations, I seek to shed light and understand a bit better what the internet is doing to global labor markets from the vantage point of young workers in low and lower middle income countries. People from the global south who have hitherto been often shut out from lucrative jobs and careers in global labor markets. And I want to find out whether or not the internet is helping to change that, whether or not it's opening up new avenues for career development for people from the global south. And in this current cluster of conversations, I'm in Kigali, Rwanda, speaking with different ecosystem players about the fledgling global business services, business process outsourcing sector in Kigali, Rwanda. I've spoken with Adewale Yusuf of Outschool. I've spoken with Joseph Semafara of Solve It Africa. It's actually Solve It Africa, not Solve IT. And I've spoken to Oriane Ruzibiza of Education First. Now, today's conversation is with Pépita Uwineza of PesaChoice. PesaChoice is a human resources platform. It's a fintech working not just for the global business services sector, but for companies of all sectors and all sizes. It's tailoring human resources to the African market, not just in Rwanda, but across Africa in various countries. And as I hope becomes clear in the conversation, this company might be particularly interesting in terms of understanding labor laws in different African countries and also understanding workers and labor and the capacity of labor itself in different African countries. Pépita and I have a bit of a broader conversation about the parallels between her own life and the development of Rwanda as a country, and about human capital in Rwanda and on the continent, and how this might be currently, or the way this is currently changing. So I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Here is Pépita Uwineza.
So great. Okay.
Pépita.
Yes.
Thanks for doing this.
No worries. My pleasure.
We're at Norskin here. We've just met.
Yes.
I've been thrown at you.
Yes, quite
through
literally.
a couple of different channels, yeah. So what do you do?
Sure. I am the head of partnerships and expansions at PesaChoice. I focus predominantly on all sorts of partnerships for the business, as well as expanding it to different African countries. When we first started it, even in our name, PesaChoice is Swahili. And the reason being is Swahili because that's the second most spoken language in Africa. It's the lingua franca of many people across Africa. And so we've always known that it was going to be a Pan-African company, but the new vision of that Pan-Africanism is happening now. So I've been very blessed and very excited to be the one on the project and bringing PesaChoice to different African countries.
So what is PesaChoice?
PesaChoice is an HR-enabled fintech. And so what that means is that we created an HR software for the African market, similar in Germany to SAP, or Sage in the United States, Oracle. And so the reason why we did that is because we realized that there was a lot of SMEs across Africa. The economy is starting to grow quite fast, but there aren't any softwares helping SMEs and even bigger corporations manage effectively their workforce. That and then the softwares that are available are not made for the African market. It's a very different market compared to Europe or the United States. And so we find a lot of companies investing, exorbitant amount of money in their HR softwares, only to use it for a fraction of their workforce. And so we wanted to offer an affordable HR software. And as a subset of that, we also realized that a lot of people rely on salary advances to make ends meet across the continent. Unfortunately, the salaries aren't able to match yet the rate of living. And so we offer low interest rate salary advances to employees whose employers are using our systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So our work is we're looking whether or not global business services companies, like think of call centers, contact centers, all the way up to software development firms, like exporting services from different African cities, whether or not Kigali is the right spot for them, for some of these companies, right? So it'd be interesting, PesaChoice, for a company like that coming in, providing as soft a landing as possible, right? If that would be an interesting, not only using the app, but also kind of getting consultancy services. Sarah was telling me that you guys do that kind of on this. Your product is the platform, but of course, helping people
is the main reason why we started business, right? We do a lot of consultancies for new market entrants on taxes, on payroll, on performance leave. How are things managed in Rwanda in terms of human resources? And one thing that we've realized is the digitization of the African market. You have a lot of people, for example, casual workers who are building Noskin right now, who aren't on any platforms, who don't have a digital footprint. So with our system, through our timesheets and attendance module, we've been able to start digitizing them and creating digital CVs for them. And so it's been easier for more companies that, whether they be construction companies or in the medical field, to also be able to review people who already have been in our systems and be able to track down their performance and how they've done in previous employment. And then another thing that we've realized is that in Rwanda, we haven't done extensive research outside of Rwanda, but we lose quite a bit in human capital being wrongfully allocated, right? So you'll meet someone with an accounting degree being a security guard. And that's a huge loss because we do need competent accountants, but we also need security guards. And here's the thing: they just end up getting a job because they need a job. They need to pay their bills, and so that's all they're going to focus on. But if they had a chance to have better employment, it would be best for the economy. So we've also been doing all of that research and starting to understand the market on a deeper level in terms of how do we not only bring a software, but the capacity building behind it. I like to refer to Rwanda as a startup as well. It's a very young country.
Right.
And so we have to now do all of these things that many other countries have had hundreds of years on us to do, right? And so when new market entrants come in, it's we are really trying to make it easier for them, because for me, coming from the United States, into a new market, into a new job market, it was very confusing. I was so used to LinkedIn, and most of the time I'd even get poached from recruiters, to now how do I find a job here, and how do I navigate that specific environment? And so I can't even fathom what a company would go through if I was going through it in terms of myself personally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's play that through. If we had a BPO, business process outsourcing company, wanting to set up here new, they're looking for a merger, they're looking to acquire a local company, they don't find one, so they say, okay, we're just going to get a building and we're going to set up ourselves. and we're going to find some people. And see, there's companies here like Education First that look at the language skills, and there's other companies that look at the technical skills. There's Harambe here looking at the workers. But then there's also, whenever we get these spreadsheets about what's happening in different African countries, there's also what are the labor laws, right? How how many hours? What's an hour actually mean in that country, right? You guys are not a classical consultancy for that, right? But you built the platform that has those. Obviously, you must know the Rwandan system well to build that platform, right?
Yeah. That's been my major headache in expanding, right? So we really focus on making sure that we build payroll for each country that we would move into. So in Kenya, we've built the payroll through all local taxes, and so we've sat down and understood every single tax with our lawyers. Ivory Coast, same thing, and the other countries that we're going to. So when we give you the payroll system, it's fully built for your country, for the country that you're expanding into. We have some clients that have been like, hey, love it here in Rwanda, would like to move it to X country, and we're like, okay, fine, give us a month. And so we take the month to build the payroll that really fits that country and make sure that it's completely legal.
Okay, so you're right now in Ivory Coast, Kenya, and Rwanda?
Yes, we are also expanding to Uganda as well. In the near future, we just finished the payroll for there, so really excited. Yeah.
So if we had a global business services company looking at those three markets, say in East Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya, pros and cons, you could help them actually also make that comparative case, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. We can make it in terms of comparative, in terms of how expensive labor is, right? So you have to also understand human capital is different.
The other side, right? Not just the labor laws, but the labor itself already also, right?
Also how competent labor is as well.
How would you know that? Like, I'm just asking, if it's a new sector, how would you guys...
So there's a few things that you need to take into account when you're expanding, right? For example, if you look at a country like Rwanda is a very young country, and so it's learning a lot, and it's done tremendous, right? But Kenya is more established, and in terms of education, they have darn good education. So you're able to see all these things. Even us as a company, when we're expanding, these are things that we're looking at, right? And it's true. I mean, labor in Kenya is slightly less expensive than in Rwanda sometimes. Just like sometimes in Rwanda, labor is slightly less expensive than in Kenya. So you have to be able to manage, right? There's also a threshold in education as well, in capacity building up for your team. I think in Kenya, because it's really a cosmopolitan city, Nairobi is a cosmopolitan city, the threshold is a bit lower because it's been thriving for so long, whereas in Rwanda it's a little bit higher. But I think you have to take these things in account. It depends on the team that you're trying to build. It depends on the culture that you're building. But I think each market has its positives and negatives, and so we just give you the transparent truth from our own personal experience. We have team members that have worked in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, you name it, and so they're also able to offer their advice as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes I hear that Rwanda has all the governance, all the stability.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the bottleneck is the human capital compared to larger markets like Kenya, like Nairobi, right?
Yeah.
Where it's sometimes not so clear who you have to deal with on the government side, but once you've got that figured out, you've got a larger labor pool. And as you said, potentially maybe even more price competitive, even though it's a slightly richer country, right, overall. So, yeah, that's interesting. So, we're looking at levels of English. That's one of the, for call centers, right? That's the first thing people ask. Like, what's the level of English? Like, we have the system. Like, are you at B2 or at C1 or at B1? Kind of. And how large is that pool? I just spoke with Education First, Orion from Education First, and they kind of have they're doing a survey through their tests. And so that's super interesting that you guys are also looking at that side. Like, you're looking at the labor side too, not just, I thought the value was purely in understanding the labor and the labor laws,
Yeah.
and then setting up that platform for it. But I guess it goes both ways, right? It's two sides of the coin.
Yeah, right, because we're still expanding too. We're a company that's expanding across Africa, and so we have to look at these things for our own personal, agenda as a company. So we ended up looking at both sides, which is pretty cool to see because you have a very clear picture when you finally, move into a country. And it's also, I think, for me, my background is in international business, so it goes even. I do it on a deeper level and understanding the culture, how people are, what drives them and what doesn't, right? So what can work in Germany doesn't work in Africa, right? And so you have to be very realistic and understand the culture a bit better to be able to move forward, right? Like you're saying, in Rwanda we have an amazing governance. I remember when I worked at a previous company, one of my Nigerian coworkers was complaining about getting a passport, and it was taking a few months. And for me, it was just 2 weeks. On Idembo, applied. They're just like, hey, come take your picture, and then we'll give you your passport. You're good to go, right? It's a very seamless process. I think setting up a business is only 6 hours in Rwanda, so via RDB. So it's a very easy system to move into compared to another country, and I think the threshold of market entry is quite low, which is why we chose. Also, even though we are Rwandan, this is why we chose Rwanda, because it was just easy, and as a startup, it made sense, right? Because you want to move into a country that is not going to kill you at the early stage. You want to be able to fail and get back up and fail and get back up and fail and get back up.
Yeah.
And Rwanda offers that. And on top of that, its governance is very much willing to help. I mean, I can't count how many times I've just walked to a regulatory, person and be like, hey, a regulator, I'm like, hey, this isn't working. And they're like, okay, so how do we help you? What do you need, right? And a lot of times it's either I've gotten it wrong or, yeah, it's true. They haven't thought of this specific issue and under that lens, and they're very much willing to look at it and understand it and do their own research and adjust it accordingly. I think the best example I could give you is the sandbox that the National Bank of Rwanda just recently opened for fintechs. It was because the NDFI license was taking, the non-deposit taking financial institution license was taking so long that you would have startups that are ready to go, but they just can't go because they have to have the license, right? And so they created, startups got together, voiced their concern, and they created a sandbox for them. So now they're able to pilot out their projects before they reach out for a license. And on top of that, the National Bank of Rwanda actually gives them input and gives them feedback and helps them as well as startups grow. So it's a very communal way of doing things with the government and business here in Rwanda, which is, I think, great personally, that you might not have in other countries, but like you're saying, you might have better human capital. So now the issue is you could maybe set up here and possibly bring your employees from other countries here as well, right? The cool thing with the East African community is the free trade and the free movement that we have, right? So there's a lot of things that you can look at in that area.
A lot of times I hear that in this particular sector that we're looking at, global business services, that sometimes it's not even so hard to find regular labor that can do the rote work, but mid-level management, meaning someone or people who convey the message from headquarters. Like if you have a global business services company that's like working in 135 locations globally, right? They've got their structures and their plans, but going into a new location, there's also a specific culture, right? And you need someone, preferably someone local, who can kind of translate what the global business wants to the local labor force, right? Who is in this particular sector a lot of times just straight out of school or straight out of university, right? These are not people who've got, this is to build their CVs, this sector, right?
Yeah.
People complain about high attrition rates, but it's the first 2 years of your career that you work in a contact center, kind of get going, but you need some more senior people in the middle. So some people in the sector told me that it's sometimes harder even to find that mid-level management who can, you can bring people in, but then sometimes it's not, it doesn't really work so good. So do you guys also look at if you're looking at an HR platform, is that only for workers or is it also for that next tier? Like how would you, because you're mainly working with smaller companies, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, we do have quite a few big companies as well, but we haven't really focused on that area, simply because we don't necessarily have the expertise. Maybe in the future, when we grow as a company, that's something that people have raised to us, and that's definitely something that we might be thinking about in terms of impact as well. But I think one really great company that's around here, actually, in this house, is the African Management Institute.
okay,
And they focus predominantly on building managers, on building people who have maybe the skill set but don't necessarily know how to translate it into management, and literally train them into managers. And they've done quite a few graduation. I've attended a few here. They've done great work, right? So I think it's also partnering up with the right companies, and knowing the ecosystem when you're going into. So if we have a client that has that issue, it's the first thing is like, okay, let me connect them to AMI and see if they can help them, right?
Yeah.
And chances are AMI is also going to be able to connect them to other people if they don't necessarily have what they're needing. But they're very well in touch in terms of the education sector. They know exactly where to tap into. There's also quite a few great universities here, like Kepler. I think Kepler produces some of the best talent in Rwanda that I've seen. The African Leadership University is an amazing one. Carnegie Mellon is also pretty amazing. And so you can also focus on, that's, getting people from those areas as well. But there's, it's growing. It's still, like I said, Rwanda is a startup, so it's growing. But I think there's solutions to these issues, definitely. Yeah.
So that's a great thing about a place like this. Norskin is a hub, right? For example, what you've just told me, I didn't know, right? So I'll just go next door and ask them for an interview, kind of to just kind of scope out the ecosystem. That's like the great thing about agglomeration, right? Being close together.
Yeah.
So you might have not known had you guys not been in the offices next to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. It's beautiful because we also form friendships, and it's like I like to annoy the AMI team often because I'm trying to see what they're doing, and they have like such great material. We've also hired a few team members from AMI directly to our team because we've just had conversations around the house. We've had conversations around the house, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, you're great. Would you like to join our crazy team?" So it's been great.
Well, I mean, I've done Adewale Yusuf yesterday or a couple days ago, and Hassan was doing the video, and I had brought my own stuff.
Yeah.
They've got that great setup down there.
Yeah.
And since then, Hassan and I kind of became friends, and he's helping me out with this. I could have never kind of brought someone like him along, right?
Yeah,
so it's just really, it's a really cool thing about. There's still something physical, right?
Yes.
This is kind of a theme throughout my interviews. I want to ask your personal opinion.
Yes.
Like we're moving into the digital space, yet there's something different about meeting someone face to face, right? We're still the human contact. I couldn't have asked Hassan through the internet to help me with the camera setup, right? He wouldn't have. He would have been like, "Who's this guy? Why, why does he want to?" But here, it's so much more natural to actually do it. I'm bringing it up because we're talking about everything moving online, right? So, but yet, as everything is moving online, Silicon Valley is clustered. Manhattan is clustered. Norskin is clustered. It's still coming close together. The pandemic might have changed it, but I have a feeling that after the pandemic, we cluster again.
And it's true. I think, for me, I moved during the pandemic. I was working for a tech startup in DC. Well, it's no longer a startup. It's now quite successful.
Okay.
Yes. But when I was working for them, the cool thing that I liked about working there was the community, right? The team. I think that they've done an amazing job hiring, right? And being online and everything happening in the United States, I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna come back here, right? And the reason I did that is because I think essentially I think for Rwanda, I can't speak for the entirety of Africa, but we're a very communal community, right? And so I don't think we could really go online fully without having people also connect physically, because it's inherent of our culture. It is who we are. And I think it's true. It's the human fabric. It's, humans are social beings, and so I think Nosken offers this opportunity. You have a lot of people who are remote workers. I was just saying with one of my friends who's, working remotely from a different country, but he's here because he's like, well, I like to see people. I don't want to stay at home all day and not talk to anyone. It's true. I was going crazy in my apartment in DC. I literally was. Yeah, right. You end up talking to the walls. You're like, what's up, man?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're like a living experiment. I mean, I teach at a university in Germany, and I think, I hope this is just me experiencing it, but I think that our students now are more reluctant to present in front of the class than they were in the past before the pandemic. Because for me, I'm old, so these 2 years weren't that big a chunk.
Yeah.
But if these 2 years were between 20 and 22, that's a big part of your life.
That's
2 years
huge,
at home,
yeah.
and then afterwards, are you going to be able to present to other people? So I keep trying to push them.
Yeah,
but we're getting away from.
Yeah.
But that's where are you from?
So I'm Rwandan.
You are Rwandan originally.
Yes, originally. I lived 15 years of my life here. I actually work in my old kindergarten. I spent 15 years of my life on this very campus.
Oh, this...
Because it used to be a school.
Okay.
It used to be École Belge.
Okay.
And this is where I learned to read, write, play, do math. I'm really bad at math. It's never changed. That's the one thing. I'm sorry. I can apologize to my professors for that. But so it was a school before it became Nosken.
On these grounds.
On these
I
grounds.
didn't know that, yeah.
So for me, it's a full circle moment. And then I left at 15 to go in boarding school in the United States, in Georgia, of all places. So it was great. And I spent 10 years in the United States, so I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 10 years, that's a bit longer than just going to university there.
Yes. I did high school, university, and worked.
Okay.
Before I came back. And I think it was an interesting experience. I think both countries have made me, actually 3 countries have made me who I am. It would be Rwanda, the United States, and a bit of Belgium because of the school, and my summer spent in Europe as well.
Okay.
So it's interesting to come back because you have a third culture viewpoint. And I don't know if you know about the third culture concept, but it means you're a kid who's grown up in different cultures and you create your own culture within that. So it's been great to kind of have it here at Nosken because it's basically like full circle and I can be totally myself, right? I can be as American as I want, as Rwandan as I want, and sometimes as Belgian as I want. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what made you come back?
It was a sense of duty. I think my philosophy in life is to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And I was in the United States working, loved my job, but, I kept wondering, it's not like I was the smartest cookie in a jar, right? It's not that I was maybe the smartest or the fittest or, whatever. It's just that I was presented with opportunities that many other young Rwandans didn't get to have and are much smarter than me, much more eloquent than me, and have, deserved to have these opportunities. So my entire reason of coming back to Rwanda is because I want to grow this country, to have other young Rwandans have the same opportunities as I did, right? And so this is why I'm here. This is why I'm funny enough, at an HR startup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's capacity building.
Right.
Yeah, I really want to encourage that, to encourage young Rwandans to study and to do things that they believe are hard to do, right? And to seek discomfort. That's exactly what I do every day.
And how long have you been back now?
It's been 2 years now.
You came back and then they made you stay at home as...
It was great.
Me too.
I loved it. I've always been an introvert, but I took a BDR job because I was like, well, I need to learn how to talk to people.
Okay.
Yeah, so what best way than to work for a public affairs startup and talk to lobbyists day in and day out? They really open you. They really break you out of your shell. Right. And so I've learned how to, speak publicly, like what you're saying with your students. I've learned how to speak publicly. I've learned how to do hard things and go after things that may seem insane to most people, but eventually it does make sense through that lens. Yeah.
That's one thing about our sector, that this BPO sector. I'm sure you've heard of sometimes there's a positive and a negative narrative about it, right? The positive narrative is that it helps people get into work. The negative narrative is that it doesn't pay very well and it doesn't lead to anything. Kind of, you're just answering calls. A lot of times that's, but then this, especially for a place like Rwanda, these first 2 years of being on the phone with people every day, day in and day out, people who have problems, and you help them solve their problems with your voice, right? That can really, further down the line when they go into different jobs, really set the foundation of the soft skills, right?
Oh,
of
absolutely.
International communication.
Absolutely. I think just the sheer, because I remember when I would call my bank in the US and it'd be someone in India responding. I mean, you could really feel like them trying to relate to me, and to, even the way they're speaking and all that. Those soft skills go a long way in the corporate world, right? And I think people don't look at that, right? But you're also, we are a young country that is still in need of a lot of capacity building. And that's one way to do that. That's one way to teach people how to speak up, how to talk, how to be eloquent on at any level. It is through these jobs. And I think it's easy when you're sitting in New York somewhere to be like, oh my gosh, they're paying the pay is really low. It's like, yeah, but most people live on very low income across Africa.
Compared to what, right?
Yeah.
The pay is low, yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so that, to me, the Rwandan culture, I travel between Kenya and Rwanda a lot, and it's very different in terms of Kenyans are very bubbly. Very open in general, like there's also Kenyan introverts. But in general, maybe for the culture, for the history, Rwanda is a reserved culture, a quiet culture. It takes a while to kind of get people to warm up to you, right? That's kind of a good reason for me to think that this sector could help kind of create this skill that's maybe, I don't want to say the skill is lacking, but it's just something that's a tool in the toolbox that Rwandans can kind of maybe cultivate more to be more open. And on the other side, it's something that the companies are worried about. Can we come to Rwanda? Is the human capital? Because a lot of times people confuse quietness and reservedness with lack of human capital, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely not true, right? I think the best one would be our team at PesaChoice. A lot of people are very quiet, but they've broken out of their shell being with us, because you have a bunch of salespeople running around like cracking jokes with them, and they're like, okay, you know what? All right, let me try it out, right? And so I think it's true that we are a very reserved culture. I think one culture I could even compare it to is more a Japanese culture. We're very similar culturally in terms of being reserved, being, a bit of wall between you and the person. But one thing for me, when I went to high school in the United States, when I first came to the US, I could not speak. I was just, my English was nonsense because I was fully a French speaker.
Right. Okay.
But two, I spoke very low, because culturally, I think you've been in here, people speak with a low tone. We're not very loud, we're very cognizant of other people around us. And so I used to speak with a very low tone. And I get to the United States in the South out of anywhere. People are like, I can't hear you. Speak up. Like, right. Who are you talking to? A ghost? It's like, okay, fine. And then, so my decibels went up and went up and went up and went up. And I came back to Rwanda, and everyone was like, yo, you are loud. You are just, wow. And I can even realize sometimes I'm like projecting. From the United States, from my time in the United States, and it's been great, like being able to relearn how to balance that out. But one thing I definitely that my team, that my CEO has done diligently and for our team is really like teach people how to public speak, how to express themselves, and how to speak firmly. Because it is a skill that is needed to, a lot of times it can even be the deciding factor between you getting an opportunity and someone else, is how do you present yourself? How do you present your image? How do you present yourself? How do you speak? Do you speak firmly? Do you believe in what you speak in, right? In what you're speaking. So I think that's a great tool that, a lot of young runners could benefit from.
Right. So for any companies listening out there, how long did it take for you personally to go from quiet Rwandan girl to loud Southern American?
Oh, it took me like a month.
A month. Okay.
It took me a month.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So it's really short, because I had that same experience.
Yeah.
So I mean, on a different history, but
yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of get that on record, that this kind of stuff happens fast if you're in the right environment, right?
Very fast. It took me a month. It was just like, okay, quick. Now I know how to deal with that, right? Even like the slightest thing, like eye contact. In Rwanda, we don't look at people. Like now, I've had to relearn how to not to look at, because I tend to terrify people. They look like, "Why are you looking at me?" I'm like, "I'm sorry."
Right.
But a month, right? It's usually that's 21 days. That's all it takes to learn something new. Yeah.
And also, young people learn so fast. Like so, if you have this young demographic, a friend of mine, he's been here for 10 years, and we went to an event at ALU. This was a couple months ago. And it was students presenting to other students, and they had set everything up. And on the way home, like he told me, like 10 years ago, this would have been unthinkable that students speak this freely. And even a place like ALU, African Leadership University, Africans from all over the continent speaking to each other, and Rwandans right in the mix, speaking to each other freely, and just really, I guess it's the internet as an influence, but also each other, and this, like, it's just so changed, right? So what I'm feeling is that even if we come to a conclusion now about a particular market, it's not ready. If you think that as a company, come back 2 years from now, it might look very different because of this demographic. Like in Germany, nothing will change for the next 10 years because it's an old country, right? In Rwanda, young people with growing internet connection, with a growing cluster of people, just changes the culture so much, right?
Yeah, and I think it's very unfair to think of places as finite. The very essence of humanity is its fluidity.
Right.
We are ever changing, ever growing. So obviously we're going to change and grow, and you only know what you know in that moment. You can only make decisions based on what you know in that specific moment in time. But once you have better data, you can be like, oh, I could actually do this one, but you just didn't know, right? It's a matter of also exposure a lot of times. I think my story is a story of exposure. And so if young Rwandans had that same exposure than I did, they probably would turn out the same way, right? So it's true to see Rwanda in this new light, because I think most companies should take a page out of the Rwandan government. The Rwandan government has done a great job educating people, because they know that people don't know. So they just sit down with you and like, yo, we're not going to do plastics anymore, and this is why. And now no one does plastic. It's just, I think when I went to the US and I was seeing like plastic bags, I was like, wait, what? Like, y'all are so backwards. Right? So it's about education, and the Rwandan public is a public that really loves to learn and study what they don't know. They know what they know, and they don't know what they know, and they're always willing, right? So I think even in Germany, you can't say that your old country will never change. No, you will. The young people have been changing a lot of things. I've seen the news, right? So this world is, ever changing, ever evolving, and it's beauty. It's beautiful to see it, and it's a great opportunity for businesses as well, because you get to be the first entrant, the first market entrant, and you get to have the first market entrance, and so you get to set the rules for your competitors. You get to define how things are done in that specific market. Right? And you could have seen that in China when KFC came in. They've done an amazing job. So you can take a lot of of understanding when it comes to international business and entering different markets. I think it's a good thing to always look at different markets and how different sectors, not even maybe what you're doing, but like, you know, a place like KFC did. Like, how did they study the market? How did they understand exactly what, you know, Chinese people were into, and have successfully built a legacy in China from that specific, just studying, just taking the time to be like, hey, it might not be right now what we want, but I see a future, right? And so they sat down and they learned and they perfected the recipes. And I mean, KFC in China is awesome. I think it might be the best in the world.
Okay,
I haven't
okay.
gone to all countries, but it's my favorite so far.
Okay. I didn't know there was a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
absolutely.
But this is making me hungry. So.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, it's true, right? So I think sometimes taking the little bit of time to teach people really sets you up to success, to be a success in different markets. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been great for me. Thank you for doing this.
No worries, no worries.
So-
Pleasure being on your podcast and seeing everything you're doing. I hope you have a great time. When are you leaving?
Tomorrow night.
Oh, okay, so you're on your way out.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But I'll be back.
All right.
I'll be back soon.
Please come back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.